Good evening, community. Welcome to a new session of those horror stories that we know you like so much. Don't forget to subscribe, give us your valuable like, and activate the campaign so you don't miss the next cabinet of horror story. The wrong number. It all started with a call. At 2:13 in the morning, my cell phone vibrated on the nightstand, illuminating the dark room. The number wasn't saved, but I answered anyway, half asleep. Hello? On the other end, there was only a strange noise, like someone dragging something heavy across the floor. Then, a soft voice, barely a whisper. "I see you." I hung up immediately. I thought it was a prank, maybe a drunk dialing randomly, but something didn't add up. I looked out my bedroom window, and for a moment, I swore I saw a silhouette under the streetlight, standing still, motionless. The light was flickering right. I tried to go back to sleep, but I couldn't. Every little sound in the house seemed amplified. The creaking of the floor, the buzzing of the refrigerator, even my own breathing. At 2:29, the phone rang again. The same number, the same number. I didn't want to answer, but I couldn't ignore it. My hands trembled as I swiped the screen. "Who is this?" I asked, trying to sound firm. This time there was no noise, just heavy, slow breathing. And then, that voice again. "I'm already inside." I froze. I looked towards my bedroom door, which was ajar. I couldn't see anything beyond the dark hallway. I got up carefully, trying not to make a sound, and grabbed an aluminum bat I kept under the bed. I walked towards the living room, turning on the lights as I went. Everything seemed in order. The doors were locked, the windows too. Maybe it was a more elaborate prank than I thought. Then I saw my cell phone. It was on the dining room table. I had taken it with me to the bedroom. I'm sure of it. My ears started ringing. Suddenly, a notification appeared on the screen. It was a message from an unknown number. "Don't turn around." My body froze. The silence was absolute, oppressive, as if the whole world was holding its breath. But I couldn't help it. My head turned slowly. There was no one there. I turned on all the lights in the house, looking for an explanation. I checked every corner, every closet, under the furniture, but I was alone. Or at least, I wanted to believe that. I didn't sleep again that night. Days passed, and I didn't receive any more calls. But something changed. My things started appearing in places where I never left them. My toothbrush in the living room, my keys in the bathroom, a dirty dish in the hallway. I thought I was losing my mind until one night, when checking my cell phone before going to sleep, I found a new photo in my gallery. It was me, asleep, taken from the foot of my bed. And the worst part, the date said it was last night. The bleeding. I've always had a very sensitive hearing. As a child, any noise would wake me up. Over time, I got used to it. But I never stopped hearing things that others didn't perceive. A few months ago, I started hearing a dripping sound. At first, I thought it was a pipe, but I checked the whole house and found nothing. The dripping was constant, rhythmic, like a metronome marking a slow, heavy tempo. The strangest thing is that I only heard it in absolute silence, just before falling asleep. At first, it bothered me, But then I started anticipating it, waiting for it. It became part of my nightly routine. One night, while listening to the dripping, I realized something. It wasn't coming from the walls or the ceiling. It was coming from inside my head. I tried to ignore it, but it was useless. The dripping became louder, more insistent. I started having trouble sleeping, waking up in the middle of the night with my heart pounding. One night, in total darkness, while the dripping resonated in my skull, I heard something else, a whisper, barely audible, between each drop. I didn't understand what it was saying, but the intonation was mocking, as if someone was laughing at me from inside my own head. Now, every time there's silence, I wait for it. El eco vacío, the empty echo. I've always been fascinated by silence, not the total absence of sound, but that instant between noises, that void where it seems like the world stops for a second. As a child, I took refuge in those small silences. They gave me a strange sense of peace. But a few months ago, everything changed. I started noticing an echo, not a normal echo, the kind that bounces off walls, but an internal echo, as if my own thoughts were resonating inside my head. At first, it was subtle, barely perceptible, a slight reverberation after every word I thought. I attributed it to stress, lack of sleep, but over time, the echo became stronger, more defined. It wasn't just after my thoughts anymore. I started hearing it after any sound, the ticking of the clock, a dog barking in the distance, even after my own breathing. A brief moment of silence, followed by a distorted repetition, as if someone was imitating the sounds, but with a muffled, empty tone. The echo became a constant presence in my life. It followed me everywhere, accompanied me in every moment. I tried to ignore it, to concentrate on other things, but it was useless. The echo was always there, lurking at the edges of my perception. One night, while trying to sleep, I heard something different. After the usual echo of my breathing, I heard a voice. It was weak, barely a whisper, but I could make out one word: more. The echo repeated several times, each time with greater intensity, and the voice, each time clearer, more insistent. More. 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 Since that night, the echo no longer just repeats sounds. It also repeats words, isolated words, disjointed phrases, sometimes even fragments of conversations I had years ago. And between the repetitions, the voice keeps whispering, more. I don't know what it means, what it wants to say, but the way it says it, with that hungry intonation, chills me to the bone. Now, I live with constant fear, anticipating the next echo, the next word, the next whisper. I wonder what more will ask for next time, and above all, what I am willing to give. Aquí tienes la traducción al inglés de El Juego del Silencio. The quiet game. It all started as a joke. There were 5 of us, bored on a Saturday night, when someone came up with the idea of playing the quiet game. According to the rules, each participant had to remain completely still and silent for 3 minutes, no matter what. If anyone moved or spoke, they lost. It seemed silly, but there was one condition that made us hesitate: turning off all the lights. Only my laptop screen would remain on, displaying a timer to keep track of the time. We agreed. We sat in a circle in the living room, turned off the lights, and started the timer. The first few seconds were easy, but soon the silence began to feel heavy, oppressive. I could hear my own breathing, my heartbeat. At 40 seconds, someone moved. It was Carla. She said she felt like something was touching her. We laughed, although deep down we were all a little tense. We restarted the timer. The second round was worse. Barely 20 seconds passed when I felt a strange coldness behind me. I didn't say anything. I told myself it was my imagination. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw Diego, the one to my right, slowly turning his head towards the dark hallway. When the time was up, we turned on the lights. Diego seemed nervous. We asked him what had happened, but he just said it was nothing. "Let's keep going," he said. In the third round, the atmosphere changed. I don't know how to explain it, but it was as if the silence wasn't just in the room, but inside us. At 50 seconds, I heard a whisper, barely audible, but clear as water. "Get out of here." I opened my eyes wide and looked at my friends. They were all motionless. No one had spoken. The timer reached 0, and I turned on the lights immediately. "Who spoke?" I asked. They looked at me confused. No one had heard anything. The last round was the worst. We decided to do it one last time to get rid of the bad taste in our mouths. We turned off the lights, and as soon as the timer started, the silence was no longer just uncomfortable. It was hostile. I could feel it tightening my chest. At 30 seconds, I heard footsteps. They weren't inside the house, but behind me, right where no one was sitting. I wanted to move, to scream, but the rules were clear. No one moved. At 2 minutes, Carla broke the rules. She screamed and turned on the lights. "There was someone behind me," she said, trembling. We laughed nervously, trying to calm her down, but Diego remained silent. When we asked him if he was okay, he didn't answer. He just stared at the timer, which was still running even though no one had activated it. "Why won't it stop?" he said in a whisper. I slammed the laptop shut, but the timer was still there, projected on the wall. It was counting down. When it reached 0, the lights flickered and went out. In the darkness, I heard the same voice as before, whispering louder. "Now it's my turn." We never spoke about the game again, but since that night, every time the silence is too long, I feel like someone is waiting. The man who shouldn't have been there. Everything happened during my first job as a delivery driver. It was simple. Pick up packages and drop them off at houses. One night, I was assigned a delivery to the outskirts of the city. It was rare to receive orders so late, but it didn't seem suspicious to me. The address was in an isolated area with few houses and poorly lit streets. When I arrived, the GPS marked a house at the end of a dirt road. It was almost completely dark, with only one light flickering on the porch. I honked the horn from the car, but no one came out. I got out and walked towards the door with the package in hand. Just as I was about to knock, someone spoke behind me. "Leave it there." I turned around sharply. There was a man standing in the shadows next to a tree. I don't know how I didn't see him before. He wore a wrinkled shirt and pants that seemed too short. His face was partially hidden by the darkness, but his voice was deep and dry. "Leave it there," he repeated. I placed the package on the porch and turned to go back to the car. When I reached the vehicle, I looked in the rearview mirror, and the man was still there, motionless, watching me. I started the engine and drove away as fast as I could. I thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. A couple of days later, I received another assignment for the same address. My stomach turned. I didn't want to go back, but I had no excuse to refuse. That night, I drove down the same dark road again. The house was just as dark, with the porch light flickering. This time, I didn't see the man. I knocked on the door, hoping someone would answer. Nothing. I left the package in the same place as before, and when I turned to go back to the car, I saw him again, standing in the same place, under the same tree. He didn't say anything this time, but his head was tilted to one side, as if he were studying me. His face was still hidden by the shadows. I got into the car, but before starting the engine, I looked at the house one more time. The package I had just left was gone. I drove straight to the office and told my supervisor that I didn't want to go back to that address. He looked at me confused and checked the system. "What house are you talking about?" he asked. I gave him the address, but according to the system, that house was not registered. It was impossible. I showed him the delivery receipts, but the address didn't exist on the map. I decided to look for more information on my own. I found a forum where someone mentioned a similar house in the same area. They said it had been demolished years ago after a fire. That was my last week as a delivery driver. But the worst thing was what happened days later. One night, while I was sleeping, I woke up with a strange feeling, as if someone was watching me. Looking towards the window, I saw a shadow standing outside, next to the tree in my yard. It was him. And this time, he didn't say anything. He just looked at me. The empty echo. I've always been fascinated by silence. Not the total absence of sound, but that instant between noises. That void where it seems like the world stops for a second. As a child, I took refuge in those small silences. They gave me a strange sense of peace. But a few months ago, everything changed. I started noticing an echo, not a normal echo, the kind that bounces off walls, but an internal echo, as if my own thoughts were resonating inside my head. At first, it was subtle, barely perceptible. A slight reverberation after every word I thought. I attributed it to stress, lack of sleep, but over time, the echo became stronger, more defined. It was no longer just after my thoughts. I started hearing it after any sound. The ticking of the clock, a dog barking in the distance, even after my own breathing. A brief moment of silence, followed by a distorted repetition, as if someone was imitating the sounds, but with a muffled, empty tone. The echo became a constant presence in my life. It followed me everywhere, accompanied me in every moment. I tried to ignore it, to concentrate on other things, but it was useless. The echo was always there, lurking at the edges of my perception. One night, while trying to sleep, I heard something different. After the usual echo of my breathing, I heard a voice. It was weak, barely a whisper, but I could make out one word. More. The echo repeated several times, each time with greater intensity. And the voice, each time clearer, more insistent. More, more, more. Since that night, the echo no longer just repeats sounds. It also repeats words, isolated words, disjointed phrases, sometimes even fragments of conversations I had years ago. And between the repetitions, the voice keeps whispering. More. I don't know what it means, what it wants to say, but the way it says it, with that hungry intonation, chills me to the bone. Now I live with constant fear, anticipating the next echo, the next word, the next whisper. I wonder what more will ask for next time, and above all, what I am willing to give. Don't forget to subscribe, give us your valuable like, and activate the campaign so you don't miss the next cabinet of horror story.